Skeleton in the dark. The call came in just after lunch. The voice on the other end didn't sound like a prank. It sounded scared, shaking, heavy, like someone who had just seen something they could never unsee. First of all, I want to stay anonymous, okay? It's a dead body of a little girl in building 2815, apartment 27. Can y'all please hurry up? Look like she been there for like at least 6-7 months. That was the message. That's where this story begins. But to understand how shocking that call really was, you have to see what the officers saw when they got there. The apartment complex in DeKalb County, Georgia looked quiet. No screaming. No fighting. No movement. The kind of place people drive past without even looking twice. But behind one door, apartment 27, something waited that would change everything. Police pulled up and walked the stairs. The sun was still out. Kids were somewhere in the distance. Music playing faint from another unit. Normal. They knocked. County police. No answer. They knocked harder. Still nothing. Then the officer tried the handle. Unlocked. That's when the smell hit them. Not just trash. Not just something rotten in the fridge. Something worse. Thick. Stale. Old. A smell nobody ever forgets once they've smelled it. One officer covered his face. Another called out into the darkness of the apartment. Police department. Hello. Silence. They started clearing rooms, slowly. Flashlights up. Hands on holsters. Every step leaving prints in the dust on the floor. The place wasn't empty. That was the weird part. There was furniture. A stroller. Toys. Clothes. Little kid things. As if a family had just walked out and never walked back in. But nobody answered. No TV. No crying. No footstep. Nothing moving except the beams of their own lights. They checked the first bedroom. Nothing. Bathroom. Clear. Kitchen. Clear. One officer said what they were all thinking. Probably a joke. Because who does that, right? Who calls 911 and says, "There's a little girl in a closet," and then just disappears? They left. Hours passed. Then dispatch got a second call. Same anonymous voice. This time, angry. "I told y'all what I discovered. I discovered a little girl body stuffed in the closet. It looked like it'd been there 6-7 months and it still got clothes on. Can you please send somebody?" The dispatcher tried to stay calm, to get details. The caller didn't want to talk. The caller wanted someone to go inside and look. A third call came in, this one from security at the complex. He said some guy told him there was a dead child in 2815, apartment 27, and that they'd been trying to call 911 for 2 days. Now it wasn't a rumor anymore. Now it was a pattern. So police went back. Same building. Same unit. Same door. Same smell. Only this time they didn't sweep fast. They slowed down. They went deeper. One officer moved toward the small back room. Closet door half closed. His flashlight shook a little as he pushed it open. And then everything changed. "Bro, what is this?" Silence. "Say what?" "She in there?" At first, nobody understood what they were looking at. There was a stroller in the closet. A comforter. A red purse. Clothes. Layers of things piled and shoved and left. And then the shape came into focus. Hair. An arm. A small leg. Not moving. Not recent. Not right. The scene didn't look like anything any of those officers had ever seen before in their careers. It didn't look like TV. It didn't look like what you imagine. It looked worse because it looked real. One of them whispered, quietly, almost like he didn't want the walls to hear, "You see her hair still? Inside that closet, seated in that stroller, folded forward and left like trash in the dark, were the remains of a little girl. And that is where this case stops being a maybe, and becomes something else. Something evil." Detectives were called in immediately. The apartment was sealed off. Crime scene tape went up. And suddenly, what people thought was a joke, or a lie, or just drama between neighbors, became a potential homicide of a 7-year-old child no one had even reported missing. They found a red purse placed on top of the child's body. Inside that purse, a bank card and ID for a 27-year-old woman named Alondre Hobbs. They also found something else: documents, toys, kids' clothes, evidence that children had lived there recently. But in the leasing paperwork for the unit, no kids listed. Only 2 adults, Alondre and her husband, Cameron. When police tracked down the property manager, she said something that chilled investigators even more. Yes, Alondre lived there. Yes, she'd been under eviction. Yes, she'd moved out. But nobody could say where her kids went. And here's the part that made everyone in that room go cold. Alondre wasn't just any mother. She had 3 daughters, ages 2, 4, and 7. The 2-year-old? Last seen alive with her. The 4-year-old? With Cameron. The 7-year-old? Nobody in the family had seen her since last year. Her name was Olivia. Olivia Naomi Jordan. 7 years old. Nonverbal. Autistic. Diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Needed seizure medication. Needed help. Couldn't fully care for herself. Couldn't speak up for herself. And somehow, this child, this vulnerable little girl, ended up alone in the dark closet of an empty apartment. No missing persons report. No Amber Alert. No emergency call for help. Nothing. Like she vanished from the world, and nobody said her name. Not until that anonymous caller. Police now had one mission: find the mother, find the stepfather, and figure out what happened inside apartment 27. Because whatever happened in that closet did not happen overnight. And someone knew. Someone always knows. The mother who vanished. By the time police confirmed the identity inside the closet, the story had already spread quietly through the complex. Everyone had seen the flashing lights, the yellow tape, the investigators walking in and out with cameras. But no one could believe what they were hearing. A child's body in a stroller inside a closet, and nobody had reported her missing. Detectives needed to find one person fast. The girl's mother, 27-year-old Alondre Hobbs. The search for Alondre. Property records showed Alondre and her husband, Cameron Hobbs, on the lease. But according to the apartment manager, Cameron had stopped by just 2 weeks before the discovery, asking to be taken off the lease. He'd said nothing about a child, nothing about moving her, nothing about problems. He just wanted his name removed. Detectives checked with the Department of Family and Children Services. That's when the full picture started to form. Alondre had 3 daughters, ages 2, 4, and 7. The 4-year-old was living with Cameron. The 2-year-old had last been seen with Alondre. The oldest, 7-year-old Olivia, hadn't been seen in almost a year. Her grandmother broke down when investigators told her what they'd found. "Oh my goodness! I just came from my friend's house talking about that story. I'm hoping it's not Olivia." But the grandmother's fear turned into heartbreak when she confirmed something everyone else had missed. Olivia wasn't just a little girl. She was nonverbal, autistic, and had cerebral palsy. She couldn't walk long distances. She had seizures and needed daily medication. Her doctors said she stopped showing up for appointments nearly a year earlier. By August 2022, they had stopped refilling her prescriptions. Something had happened long before that 911 call. The hotel interview. 4 days after the discovery, detectives located Alondre in a budget hotel in Marietta, Georgia, living with her 2-year-old. The toddler was unharmed. Alondre seemed calm, too calm. Inside the interrogation room, she sat across from 2 detectives who hadn't told her what they knew yet. They started with small questions. "Detective, how many kids do you have?" Alondre, 3. A 2-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old. "Detective, and where are they now?" Alondre. "The oldest one, Olivia, she's with Cameron, her daddy. He kicked me out and he kept her." But Cameron had already told police he hadn't seen Olivia in months. He claimed he'd left the apartment last summer, and that Alondre stayed behind with all 3 children. "I moved out," he told investigators. She kept the kids. I just came by sometimes to pick up my 4-year-old for visits. Detectives pressed Alandre harder. Detective, why did you leave her there? Alandre, because it was too much. I couldn't take care of her. I left her with Cameron. Detective, when you left her, was she alive? Alandre, softly, she was alive. Those words hit the room like thunder. She admitted it. She left her. She left her in the stroller. She left her in the closet. And she walked away. The child's last hours. As investigators listened, a grim timeline began to emerge. Alandre said she'd left Olivia in the stroller inside their bedroom closet, just for a while. She said she gave her a bottle of water, a few snacks, and her seizure medicine. She said she planned to come back. But she never did. Instead, she went to her brother's house to chill. And then she stayed there for a month. By the time police found Olivia, 4 months had passed. Her remains weighed only 5 pounds. Investigators found traces of a plastic grocery bag inside her abdomen, shaped like a stomach. Scraps of red fabric and green plastic were discovered inside what remained of her digestive tract. The autopsy revealed she'd died slowly, of starvation and dehydration. But the story didn't end there. A mother's denial. Back in the interrogation room, detectives asked why the door had been sealed with towels and why a purse had been placed on top of the stroller. Detective, someone closed that door and pushed towels behind it. That wasn't by accident. Alandre, I didn't do that. Detective, then who did? Alandre, not me. I left the door open. Every word out of her mouth dug the hole deeper. She claimed depression. She claimed abuse. She claimed she thought Cameron would take care of Olivia. But every physical clue said otherwise. When investigators asked her about the Facebook post she made in April, saying she was going through the worst time of her life, she didn't mention her daughter at all. Alandre, I was talking about my boyfriend. He cheated on me. I was madly in love with him. Even when detectives asked whether she wanted a funeral for Olivia, she said no. Nobody really dealt with her like that, she said coldly. Nobody helped me out with her. The revelation. When investigators returned with the autopsy results, they pressed her one final time. Detective, did you ever think about going back to get her? Alandre, it ran across my mind, but I wasn't in the right mental state. Detective, did you tell anyone she was in there? Alandre, quietly no. Detective, not one person? Alandre, nobody. She admitted she hugged her daughter before leaving. She said she told her she loved her. And then she closed the door. Behind that door, Olivia remained for months, silent, still, unseen, until one stranger decided to make a call. The detectives knew they were almost at the truth. But the hardest question was still coming, one that would finally expose everything she'd done, and what really happened to Olivia Naomi Jordan. Skeleton in the dark. The room was silent. Only the faint hum of the camera recording the interview filled the air. Across the table, Alandre Hobbs sat still, head lowered, fingers twisting the strings of her hoodie. For a moment, it looked like she might cry. But she didn't. The detective leaned forward, voice steady but sharp. Her body was so badly decayed that none of us have seen anything like that in our lives, Alandre. You can stop playing dumb now. Tell us what happened to your daughter. The mother didn't answer. She stared at the floor. Her voice was soft when it finally came out. I loved her. But love didn't explain why a 7-year-old autistic girl, one who couldn't speak, barely walked, and needed daily seizure medicine, was found in a closet, starved to death. A mother's story. Alandre began to speak, in fragments, her words tripping over themselves. I left her in the stroller. She had water. She had chips. I fed her before I left. The detective stopped her. We didn't find any food or water, Alandre. She hesitated. I know. But I left some. I remember I did. It was the same pattern the investigators had seen all night, half-truths wrapped in excuses. She claimed she had left her daughter alive, that she planned to return, that she was overwhelmed. But when they showed her the photos, the sealed door, the comforter piled on top of the stroller, the red purse with her ID sitting on the child's body, her story started to fall apart. "That wasn't me," she whispered. "Someone else must have done that." The detective shook his head. "Someone shut that door, placed towels under it, and stacked things on top to hide the smell. Only one person had the key, you." For the first time, her eyes filled with tears. But it wasn't regret they saw, it was fear. The last days. Over the next hour, investigators pieced together the final days of Olivia Naomi Jordan. According to Alandre, she had been living under stress, eviction notices, fights with Cameron, loneliness, and financial strain. But while she was seeking peace, Olivia had been left trapped in the dark. The medical examiner's report painted a horrifying reality. Olivia weighed just 5 pounds when found. Her organs had disintegrated. Inside her body were bits of plastic and fabric, things no human could digest. It was proof she had tried to eat anything within reach before her body shut down. "She had a mind of a 2-month-old, Alandre said quietly. "She didn't know how to get out of the stroller. She didn't know how to ask for help." "So you knew she couldn't move and you still left her?" the detective replied. There was no answer. Only the faint sound of her breathing and the scratch of a pen marking down every word. The Facebook posts. Detectives had already found posts from Alandra's social media during those months. Pictures of food, selfies, and vague quotes about heartbreak. Not once did she mention Olivia. When asked if she ever thought of going back, she said, "It crossed my mind, but I wasn't in the right mental state." "Did you tell anyone where she was?" "No. Not one person?" "Nobody." She admitted that before leaving, she hugged Olivia. She told her, "I love you," then walked out the door. She never looked back. The detective leaned in closer. "Why didn't you call for help?" "Because nobody helped me," she said. "I asked for help and nobody came. So I gave up." Her voice cracked for the first time. But the words weren't for her daughter, they were for herself. Justice for Olivia. By the time the interrogation ended, hours had passed. Detectives stepped out of the room, exhausted, hearts heavy. No one could comprehend how a mother could walk away from her own child like that. Outside, news cameras gathered. The community demanded answers. And in a way they got them, but not the kind anyone wanted. In September 2023, a grand jury indicted 27-year-old Alandre Hobbs on 1 count of malice murder, 2 counts of first-degree cruelty to children, and 2 counts of felony murder. She later pleaded guilty in April 2025 and was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 40 additional years. Her surviving daughters were taken into protective custody, far from the place that had once been home. The unspoken truth. The case left everyone, police, neighbors, even strangers online, asking one question. How could this happen without anyone noticing? No missing person report. No family check-ins. No teachers asking questions. Nothing. It was as if Olivia had never existed, until someone opened a closet and found her waiting. To this day, no one knows who made the anonymous 911 call that finally brought her name back into the light. Some believe it was a neighbor who couldn't ignore the smell anymore. Others think it was a family member too afraid to speak up. Whoever it was, their voice cut through the silence. Their call made sure the world heard about Olivia Naomi Jordan, the little girl who was forgotten until the truth forced its way out. Epilogue. In the court transcript, one line stands out more than any other. When asked if she wanted a funeral for her daughter, Alandre replied, "No. Because nobody really dealt with her like that. Nobody helped me out with her. But she was wrong. The world knows her name now. The world knows her story. And the world will never forget the girl found in the dark. The little skeleton in the closet who finally got justice."